Bristol Community College, Mathematics with Dan Avedikian, Math 011, Arithmetic, Section 4.8, Problem 9. This is Section 4.8, Problem 9. It says Fred wants to stop at a restaurant for a meal. He only has $30 in cash with him. He wants to be able to leave a 20% tip for his meal. What is the most money that Fred can spend on food and still leave a good tip? So, like if he spends $28 on his food, does he still have enough for a 20% tip? Maybe not. So he'd like to know this before he picks his dinner. So what we have to do is somehow read this and take the important parts of it and turn it into the sentence, A is P% of B. And then if I can do that, I'm going to use the formula, A over B equals P over 100. Now, how do I make A is P% of B? So that $30 has to include the price of the meal plus the tip. So what it amounts to is that $30 that Fred has is 120% of B. This one's a little bit tricky. You have to realize, figuring that the meal is 100% of the cost and then another 20% for the tip. And then you can figure it out. So the 30 that he has is 120% of what the meal will cost. Now, once you get to that point, plug it into the formula. A is 30. The is becomes equals. P is 120. The percent is where the 100 comes from. And then B is the unknown. So we can just leave it as a variable as B. So now we can cross multiply and then solve for the answer. So we have 30 times 100 on one side, and that will be equal to 120 times B is 120B. So 120B equals 30 times 100 is 3,000. That's an easy multiplication. Again, those are really big numbers, but they're mostly zeros. So just focus on the non-zero parts. Just ignore the zeros, and it comes down to 3 times 1, which is really easy. 3 times 1 is 3. Then you were ignoring 3 zeros, put 3 zeros back. A 3 with 3 zeros after it, there's the 3,000. Super easy. Now, I want just B, not 120B. So B equals the 3,000 that we got over the 120. Now, if your teacher allows you to use a calculator for your math class, you can just simply divide the numerator divided by the denominator equals, and wham, you're done. Now, if your teacher doesn't, you're going to have to divide it. So if I have to divide it out the long way, I will at least reduce enough to slice off a 0. Instead of 3,000 over 120, I can make it 300 over 12. That'll have the same answer. I'll have smaller numbers to deal with. It'll be a little bit easier. You can even reduce it a little bit more. They're both even, so you can cut them both in half. That would give you 150 over 6. They're still both even. You can cut them in half again. So half of 150 is 75. Half of 6 is 3. And actually, that divides pretty nice, too. 3 goes into 75 25 times. And 3 goes into 3 once. So without even doing the division out, you get 25. So what is 25? What does that mean? Well, that's the most Fred can spend on his food and still leave a reasonable tip. So we can go up to $25 on the food and still leave a 20% tip. Now, if you want to make this a realistic problem, you have to factor in a meals tax also. So you'd even want to peel that 25 back a little bit from there. So that way you can pay for your food, pay for your tax, and then leave a good tip.